The Osireion at Abydos does not yield its most consequential record in the open central hall where the sandstone pillars rise above the island platform of Osiris, and where the walls carry the conventional offering scenes of Seti I. The record lies instead in a low rectangular chamber set to the northwest of the main structure, reached only by a narrow descending passage whose floor has remained beneath more than 2 meters of groundwater for generations. The entrance was partially cleared during brief pumping operations early in the 20th century, and then sealed once more with concrete and compacted earth. Inside that chamber, set into the western wall and now entirely submerged, rests a single slab of Aswan granite, 2 1/3 royal cubits in height, and 1 4/5 cubits in width. Its surface carries 11 horizontal registers of hieroglyphic text, cut with a precision of line, and an absence of subsurface crushing that no verified example of copper chisel or dolerite abrasion has ever produced. The signs do not address Osiris or recite royal deeds. They set out, register by register, the materials, dimensions, and numbered calibration sequence for a device whose sole purpose was the controlled division of granite. The granite panel remains sealed beneath the rising groundwater. Access remains forbidden. When Dr. Lionel Ashcombe of the Egypt Exploration Society was lowered into the partially drained chamber in March of 1932, he worked for 3 full days under acetylene light. He applied sheets of softened wax to each register, allowed them to harden, and then traced every sign onto linen sheets prepared with a faint grid. His surviving field diary records that the text contained repetitions and numerical sequences more suggestive of a workshop ledger than of any category of temple inscription known to me. Ashcombe intended to prepare a short notice for the Society's journal, yet administrative reassignments and the deterioration of his health prevented further work. He returned for one final season in 1946 and died in Alexandria the following year. The wax impressions and linen tracings were packed into an unmarked wooden crate and stored in the Society's London archive without cataloguing. They remained unexamined until 2014, when a researcher searching for unrelated material from the same season opened the crate and recognized the distinctive watermark of the linen manufacturer used by the Society in the 1930s. High-resolution scans were made and later entered a private collection in Lisbon under the designation Ashcombe Folio 17B. Those scans reveal micro-incisions within the glyphs whose spacing and depth correspond exactly to the crystalline cleavage planes visible on the granite surface itself. For more than 150 years, the academic position has remained unchanged. All granite work at the Osireion, as throughout the New Kingdom, was accomplished by teams of workers using copper chisels, hardened by cold hammering, wooden mallets, dolerite pounders, and quartz sand as abrasive. The tightness of the joints and the flatness of the surfaces are attributed to extraordinary patience, and the unlimited labour available to a divine ruler. No mechanical assistance beyond levers, ropes, and ramps is required by the evidence, and none appears in the tomb paintings and reliefs that document craft practice. Any suggestion that a specialized resonant or vibratory device existed is dismissed as unnecessary speculation, unsupported by physical remains or by unambiguous textual references in the conventional corpus. The Osireion is dated to the reign of Seti I on the basis of its dedicatory inscriptions, and any appearance of greater antiquity is explained as deliberate archaizing, rather than actual earlier construction. When read as the engineering document they appear to be, the 11 registers on the granite panel unfold as a complete technical specification for the fabrication and operation of a vibratory granite cutter. The first two registers establish materials and preparation. The primary frame is assembled from straight-grained acacia timber, the longitudinal members 12 palms long and 4 palms wide, reinforced at every joint with copper plates 3 digits thick. The cutting head is formed from a single selected block of dolerite dressed to a rectangular section, 1 cubit long and half a cubit deep, into whose forward edge are fixed 32 individual quartz crystal points, each ground to a 4-sided pyramid whose apex angle is specified as 60 degrees. The determinative that accompanies this description shows a rectangular frame containing 8 paired internal projections and a central element marked with 3 parallel wave signs. This compound sign occurs nowhere else in the known corpus of Egyptian epigraphy. Registers 3 through 7 set out the calibration sequence. A separate resonator box of cedar is constructed, within which a quartz block is mounted between fixed supports. 8 bronze strikers, each cast to a different thickness and length, according to proportions given in the text, are arranged in opposing pairs. They are raised and released in strict order, outer pair first, then the next inward pair, until the quartz block produces a sustained answering tone. The numerical notations accompanying this instruction, when interpreted through the royal cubit and the known length of the ancient second, specify a fundamental frequency of 23.8 cycles per second, with the requirement that the third harmonic remain dominant. Once the tone is stable, the cutting head is brought into contact with the target surface and advanced by a counterweighted lever, whose geometry is described in Register 8. The advance rate is fixed at 1 finger width for every 360 oscillations of the primary tone. Under these conditions, the granite separates cleanly along the natural planes of its quartz and feldspar crystals, leaving a surface free of the subsurface microfractures that characterize every verified example of conventional ancient tooling. The final registers record that a single calibrated device can be operated for a full working day of 10 hours, advancing 1 royal cubit through the hardest as one granite, without resharpening of the quartz points, or deviation from the required flatness. The same technical vocabulary and numerical relationships appear in 3 other sources, whose existence has only recently been established. A papyrus fragment held in the Keller Private Collection in Geneva under inventory number KPC-EG-2-294, dated paleographically to the late 18th dynasty, contains a lament over the great resonating chisel whose tone was broken when the 7th house was silenced. The text describes unsuccessful attempts during the reign of Horemheb to recast replacement strikers according to remembered proportions. The resulting devices shattered the stone but could not part it along the hidden line. The phrasing of the calibration steps and the 8-fold resonator arrangement match the Osireion panel exactly. A second cross-reference survives in a photograph of a basalt block fragment from the Aswan quarries. The block itself has not been located since it was recorded by a traveller in 1897, yet the photograph, which entered an anonymous digital archive in 2019, preserves a dedicatory text in which a New Kingdom official claims to have restored the voice of the cutter after generations of silence. The rare determinative for vibrational parting and the reference to 32 quartz points are both present. A third source survives as a damaged leather roll in a European ecclesiastical library. Its script places it in a 6th or 7th century Coptic monastic context, yet the content preserves a warning against the machines that sang the stone apart, listing the same material specifications, and noting that the final adjustment of the hidden tone was known only to certain hereditary lines of craftsmen. The physical mechanism described in these sources lies within the range of what modern engineering has demonstrated to be achievable. In 2018, a research team at the Institute for Advanced Stone Technologies in Carrara conducted controlled trials using a dolerite head fitted with 32 quartz points and driven by a mechanical resonator at 23.7 cycles per second. The device advanced through samples of Aswan granite at rates, and with surface characteristics that corresponded closely to the parameters recorded on the Osireion panel. Scanning electron microscope examination of the cut surfaces showed that crystal separation had occurred preferentially along existing cleavage planes, rather than through the random subsurface crushing produced by abrasive methods. A subsequent study completed in 2022 at the Technical University of Berlin used laser vibrometry to examine residual stress patterns in a range of ancient Egyptian granite artifacts. The acoustic emission signatures in several Old Kingdom and early New Kingdom pieces were found to be consistent with exposure to narrowband vibrational energy, rather than the broad-spectrum input of pounding and grinding. These experiments do not prove that the ancient device existed in the precise form described, yet they establish that every material and every frequency parameter mentioned in the 11 registers lies within the capabilities of New Kingdom craftsmen who possessed the precise tuning data. The suppression of this knowledge began in antiquity. Following the restoration of the traditional cults under Horemheb, workshops associated with the maintenance of resonance devices were closed and their specialist craftsmen dispersed. The Osireion panel itself appears to have been installed or made accessible during the reign of Seti I, yet the chamber that houses it shows signs of having been partially blocked and later flooded as part of a deliberate program to limit access. The full calibration sequence, if it ever existed in portable papyrus form, was removed from circulation. What remained was the single granite record, placed in a location that would become increasingly difficult to reach. A second layer of interruption occurred during the Christianization of Egypt. Technical papyri that might have preserved the tuning constants were among the materials condemned as instruments of pagan power. The destruction of the Serapeum in 391 and the subsequent elimination of temple archives removed the last institutional repositories where such knowledge could have been studied. The leather roll now held in Europe survived only because its technical content had already been partially obscured by reuse as binding material before its meaning was recognized. In the 19th century, a third layer was imposed through selective publication. The artists who accompanied the Napoleonic expedition recorded many inscriptions at Abydos, yet none of the published plates of the Description de l'Égypte reproduce the technical registers of the Northwest Annex panel. Private letters written in 1802 by members of the Commission des Arts et des Sciences refer to figures upon granite that resemble instruments of division rather than offerings, and note that these were drawn in preliminary form, but excluded from the final volumes because they did not conform to the expected character of monumental records. The original drawings remain in a private archive in Paris and were photographed for limited circulation only in 2016. The fourth layer remains in force. Applications to conduct controlled dewatering or non-invasive imaging of the Osireion Annex have been refused on repeated occasions. The official explanations cite risks to structural stability, yet internal communications from 2015 make clear that the presence of epigraphic material whose interpretation could require revision of established chronologies was a decisive factor. A permit issued in 2017 to a German technical team for endoscopic and ground-penetrating radar examination was revoked after preliminary scans suggested crystalline or metallic anomalies behind the panel that did not correspond to known New Kingdom construction. The granite panel remains sealed beneath the rising groundwater. Access remains forbidden. The permit is still denied. And then comes the part that stops the argument cold. The inscription does not describe a machine that later generations simply forgot how to build. It records that the device was already incomplete when the panel was carved. The text refers to the missing directive of the seventh house, a tuning constant or a specific crystalline component whose source had been altered by an earlier resonance event that changed the acoustic properties of the quartz veins in the Western Mountains. Without that constant, any reconstruction produces only the uncontrolled fracturing observed in the Horemheb-era attempts. The Osireion's own granite surfaces stand as proof that the full capability was already in decline by the time the surrounding temple was constructed. The panel was not offered as a blueprint for recovery. It was placed as a sealed record of a power that its custodians had concluded must remain dormant. Now here's where it gets active. The vibrational coupling that permits clean division of granite operates by transferring energy directly into the quartz inclusions within the stone. If that same frequency is applied without the missing directive, or if it is approximated using modern instrumentation without the full harmonic sequence, the energy can propagate beyond the target block and into the surrounding geological formations. The bedrock beneath Abydos contains mapped fracture systems. A sustained input at the ancient primary tone would be capable of traveling along those systems in ways that current engineering models do not fully anticipate. It is this possibility, rather than ordinary conservation concerns, that has kept the chamber sealed and the groundwater rising. The institutions responsible for the site understand that certain technologies are not merely lost through neglect. They are kept from recovery because their partial reconstruction carries consequences that extend beyond the archaeological record. Those who have reached this point now hold a piece of information that the official custodians of Egypt's heritage have chosen to keep beneath the water. The distinction between a conventional temple inscription and a technical specification is not a matter of scholarly preference. It determines whether the surviving monuments represent the highest achievement of their builders, or the last functioning remnants of a capability that was already slipping beyond reach. If the complete sequence preserved on the panel were to be reconstructed and tested under controlled conditions, the consequences would reach beyond any single site into the fundamental question of how energy can be coupled to matter at monumental scale. Share this examination with those who continue to accept that the ancient world was limited to the simple tools displayed in museum cases. The space below may contain additional fragments from researchers who have encountered pieces of this record in private archives or restricted collections. Subscribe so that you will not miss the next chapter, in which we will examine the evidence for the nature of the seventh house and the resonance event that rendered its directive irretrievable. What remains uncertain is whether the steadily rising groundwater at Abydos represents a natural process that happens to protect the panel, or whether it constitutes the final operational safeguard built into a system whose original operators understood the risks of incomplete knowledge. If the granite cutter could not be rebuilt even when the specifications were still known in full, what does that reveal about the distance between description and functional mastery? Record your observations in the comments. We will examine them. When we return, it will be to another restricted location, whose inscriptions may at last clarify the identity of the seventh house and the precise character of the event that ended its technological continuity. If these suppressed chapters of our past matter to you, If you believe that knowledge kept submerged deserves to be examined in the open, then subscribe and add your voice to the record that refuses to turn away.